Good afternoon, everyone. This is the July 12, 2024 meeting of the RSA 126A 79A Commission for the Environmental and Health Impacts of Per and Polyfluorinated Chemicals. First order of business is approval of minutes of the May 10 and June 14 meetings. June 14th, we did not reach a quorum, so it's technically a non-meeting. Were there any comments or revisions to the proposed minutes? If not, I will take a motion. Can do them together or separately if you wish. Ron? Oh, no, some of you folks I think are muted. Gary, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry.
I think
I was unable to, I was in Seattle attending my sister, and I was unable to make the May meeting, so I'll have to abstain on that vote.
Okay, so why don't we take these separately? Ron, if you're making the motion, for some reason I could not hear you.
I'll make a motion for the May minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Don. All those in favor, please raise your hands visibly. Maureen, I can't see your hand. Were you there? And Meg?
I believe I had a Division 3 work session that day in
That's
House Finance, so I'm going to abstain from the May vote.
So we'll note abstentions from Gary and Maureen. And then let's move on to June.
Hello, for May, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, Rich.
Yes, I want to make sure that I'm listed as an attendee. I do not have the minutes
Chris,
here
we
in
just
front
lost
of me.
your sound.
I just want to make sure that I'm listed as an attendee via the phone for both months.
Okay, are you able to hear me? Everybody hear me now? Okay, good. All right, so we'll amend the minutes, I guess, if we didn't list Rich as an attendee. I'll try to pull those up. Actually, so I guess we'll take a motion to amend those minutes to reflect Rich Lascelles' attendance, if that's okay with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Donnie, would you amend your motion? Ron?
Sure, I believe he was included, but sure, we'll add him in.
All right. And Don, would you second the amended motion?
Yes.
Okay, and same folks in favor and abstaining? Okay, so noted. And then for the June minutes, any questions or amendments to those for folks who attended? And if not, we'll take a motion to approve. Someone wants to make that? Lorraine, and seconded by Gary. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate. And
I'm abstaining. I wasn't there.
And Nancy, you're abstaining as well. Okay, terrific. Got that important bit of business down. Mike Wimsatt.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So happy to be here to provide the DES update. Nothing really different from last time with regard to the air division, so no update from the air division. As far as the facility closure goes, not much change there. It's our understanding that their manufacturing operations of any kind are ceased there. Last we knew, they were focusing on disassembly and demolition of and scrapping of the regenerative thermal oxidizer. We do plan to reach out to them to make another site visit later this summer to take a look at things and make sure that things are going the way that we would expect them to. And there'll be more detail in the notes from last time. And then regarding the waste divisions update, so obviously the Point of Entry Treatment Unit work is continued and is advanced quite a bit. And so as they amend and include a handful of additional POET systems that they, where they're going to provide a POET for alternate water, they're doing that work as time goes on. So that should be happening in real time as they identify any new homes that need to have point of entry treatment systems installed. The real news is with regard to the design and construction work for water line installations. So for the towns of Litchfield, Bedford, and Merrimack, all the water mains for the Hillcrest Road extension area in Litchfield have been installed and tested. The water meter installations began back in April, and 19 residents have been disconnected from the water supply and are receiving water provided by the utility. Connection and water services are expected to continue through July. The water utility has indicated 34 properties have declined connection to the water line, and 14 of those opted to have a curb stop installed and a line extended to the home, but not to actually connect. The department sent a letter to non-responsive residents back in March, and the utility received responses from 11 properties that were previously identified as non-responsive. And at this time, 12 residents provided a written response declining a service connection, and 8 residents did not respond to the DES and the company notices. St. Gobain has completed the design for service connections to existing water mains in the towns of Bedford and Londonderry. Service application requests have been sent to 31 eligible properties, and completed applications have been received for 20 locations. DES will work to send out correspondence to the 11 non-responsive properties this month. And the water utility indicated that the contractor has a tentative start date for the last week of July. So the last week of this month in just a couple weeks. The St. Gobain's consultant has finalized design packages for extensions and connections to existing water mains for the Merrimack, Wildcat, and Brenda Lane air properties or service connections. Service application requests have been provided to all the eligible properties, and the selected contractors are tentatively planning to start the week of July 22nd, so just a week away, and are estimated to take approximately 3 to 4 months to complete the work. DES will be sending out correspondence to any non-responsive residents this month. And then the company is working with the water utility and the town of Londonderry to evaluate the feasibility of water line extensions in that town. The conceptual design was completed by the utility on behalf of the company at the end of April of last year. DES has met with St. Gobain, the town of Londonderry, and the utility several times to discuss the expanded water service in this area. And the idea is that in addition to the areas where St. Gobain has identified that it would provide alternate water in the form of a water line extension and connection, Londonderry also has plans to significantly expand water availability in their town and their network of a water distribution system. To that end, Londonderry went to the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund, seeking, they've already committed to spending some of their ARPA money on the project, as well as committing to a loan that they would obtain, to making payments on a loan that they would obtain from the state. But also they sought an $8 million grant to supplement that from the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund, to supplement that and any contributions that are made towards the project by St. Gobain. So that grant application was approved by the Drinking Water and Groundwater Advisory Commission just this past Monday. And so the negotiations with St. Gobain to determine their contribution to the project continue, and we'll certainly update you on that as soon as we have some news about that. So with regard to the application for groundwater management permit, we've talked about this at some length in other meetings. The companies indicated that they propose to conduct long-term monitoring of drinking water wells under a work plan prior to completing a groundwater management permit. We requested that work plan be submitted in June, and that was done. We did receive it, and we are reviewing that, and we'll be responding to that work plan in the coming weeks. And then we have periodically received updated proposals from Saint-Gobain to remedy additional water supply wells within the consent decree area following the initial agreements that we made back in 2022. That includes now term sheet attachment 20, which was received and reviewed by the department this month. That attachment includes updated list of remedies for a few properties since the April 2022. Well, it includes a updated list all the way back, and it gets added to with each term sheet attachment. We anticipate that a new proposal will be submitted in September of this year. And then we talked before about the previously unsampled wells within the consent decree area, where we had requested that the company conduct sampling, and they refused to do so. Instead, with not getting the cooperation we were looking for, we elected to do that sampling ourselves with our sampling teams. And so to date, that sampling effort by our staff was initiated in March of this year. And as of July 11th, approximately 72 residences have been either sampled or scheduled to be sampled. Our results have been received for samples collected from 63 properties. Of the results received, about 10%, or about 6 or 7 of those, have exhibited an exceedance above the current ambient groundwater quality standard of 12 parts per trillion, and 70% exceed the newly promulgated EPA MCL of 4 parts per trillion. So approximately 74 property owners have not responded to the sample invitation, and 2 have declined sampling. We have notified eligible residents by mail 3 times now, and will continue sampling properties when those requests are received. With regard to previously unresponsive properties, that's where Saint-Gobain has extended and offered a sample, but no response has been received. We provided notification letters back in April of this year to approximately 900 property owners in that category that had not been responsive. And these were properties that were previously identified for sampling but had not responded to the initial letters or had not returned access agreements. DES letters notified property owners of their eligibility to be sampled and requested that they contact Saint-Gobain's consultant to have the sampling completed. And the companies indicated that they've received a significant response from that, approximately 100 calls from property owners based on that mailing. So that's been pretty successful. Then looking at the statistics for sampling, as of June 25th of this year, 3,867 properties have been identified for sampling. 3,855 access agreements were sent. And the return rate on that is around 72%, which is about a 2% increase over what we've been typically reporting. So that's encouraging. 2,548 samples have been collected from water supply wells, and that's 15 more than the May report. And 1,161 second samples have been collected from water supply wells. That includes 989 samples that have been collected since June of 23. And then 1,139 properties have been offered bottled water, and that's 5 more than the May report. With regard to the remedial action plan, we're still reviewing that, and we anticipate reviewing and providing comment on that in the coming weeks. And then included will be the statistical graphics that have been requested, and those are certainly much more encouraging now. I won't go through all of them, but just a general rundown on the POET systems, the status of installation of proposed POET systems. About 85% of the total POETs have been installed and completed, meaning they've had their confirmatory sampling completed across the towns. And then the raw numbers on that is that there were 613 identified and 66 remain. So, or excuse me, 613 have been completed and 66 remain. And now on a town-by-town basis, it's about 81% complete in Bedford, 97% complete in Litchfield, 42% complete in, and then when it comes to water lines, about 42% of the remaining water lines have been connected. So right now, those connections look like this. We have about 30 that have been completed in Litchfield and 41 remain. And that goes back to those projects that I outlined for you a little bit earlier. And then on the POET installations for Hudson, about 75% are complete. And the POET installations for Londonderry, about 95% are complete. POET installations for Merrimack, it's about 56% complete. So that's the summary there. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Maureen, go ahead.
Just one clarification. When you did the sampling of where they refused to, right? What happens? Does bottled water get provided to those homes that are over 12? Are we going to do something for those homes over 4? And if so, who's providing the bottled water? Is it yourself or Saint-Gobain? Because if Saint-Gobain is refusing to sample, I'm guessing they're refusing to give bottled water because that implies responsibility. Who remediates? What are we doing with those homes?
Yeah, so that is on a case-by-case basis, and I don't have the statistics for that yet. You're right. In many cases, their reason for refusing to sample is because they believe that that area either doesn't meet their sampling criteria, or that in some cases they believe that there may be, if there is contamination, it may be attributable to another source. In those cases, they're unlikely to agree to provide alternate water. In the cases where they simply didn't meet their sampling criteria, but they don't feel like they have an argument that it's from another source, they might well provide the alternate water in that case. At this time, they are agreeing to provide alternate water under the agreement when they're above the New Hampshire ambient groundwater quality standard of 12. They're not agreeing to provide water when someone is below 12 but above 4. So that's something that still will, and at such time as the agency were to adopt that federal standard, they will be compelled under the terms of the consent agreement to provide alternate water.
So what a sweet deal they're getting. We're still paying for state funds and public funds for a lot of their responsibility. That's just a comment, not a question. And I just want to note that, well, first I want to really thank all the representatives that were in support of the real estate notification statement that the governor signed a couple weeks ago, because I met a family from Bedford who moved in late winter, early spring this year. They had no idea that the house had contaminated water, wasn't disclosed. The house, in fact, was in the area of settlement and responsibility for Saint-Gobain, so it wasn't even out of it. And how they found out was, usually people find out on social media. How they found out, which was interesting, but I guess good, was Second Wind actually contacted them and told them that they qualified for a POET system. So they were stunned, but glad for the outreach. So I'm assuming it wasn't the grant program because it was in the settlement area, but who knows? I just want to put that out. And one more clarification for you, Mike, when you said the remedial action plan is under review and comments will be taken, are you referring to the February submission, which is the same as last May's submission of the site remediation, or the overall groundwater management? Which are you referring to?
It's the site. It's a remedial action plan for the site property.
All right. Well, thank you I'm glad that it's just, I mean, it just takes too long, but we're getting some comments pretty soon is what you're saying, right?
Ron? Go ahead.
Mike, I have a question for you about the rebate program. I know you didn't talk about it, but I had some constituents contact me saying that the program was no longer going to accept applications submitted by treatment installers or contractors on behalf of the homeowner. And they were concerned. A couple of elderly people said it was really beneficial to them to have the contractor do it for them because they didn't really understand the application. And I was just curious if you guys were going to go through with that and what the reason would be if you did.
Sure. Yeah, we've had some problems with, as much as we wanted to make it as easy as possible, we had some problems with the vendor program. You know, it got, in some cases got a little bit abusive. One thing that it did, which is a little unfortunate, is it automatically made the price of every treatment system exactly $5,000. And it meant it removed any incentive whatsoever for customers to be selective, to get more than one quote, to ask around. Right now, what we're thinking about, we need to write rules. So a couple things to keep in mind here. We were operating the rebate program under an allocation of funding from the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund, which has now been exhausted. We have monies that are appropriated that we can use to continue the program. But we need to, when we were operating under the trust fund monies, we were operating under guidelines that we had presented to the Trust Fund Commission that had been approved. We were not required to have administrative rules to implement the program. Now that we have an appropriation from state funds, we need to have rules to implement that program. We don't have those rules prepared yet, and it's going to take some time to get them in place. So we didn't want the rebate program to be stalled any longer than necessary. So House Bill 1649 has a provision added to it that would provide the agency authority to operate the program without rules until June 30th of 2025, so about a year from now. So if House Bill 1649, which was passed by and I understand has now been enrolled, if it's signed by the governor and approved, then that would then free up those funds and allow the agency to begin again administering the rebate program. But concurrently we'll be working on rules. So we're at a little bit we're hung right now. We can't actually make any reimbursements under the program. But when we make those new rules, what we're currently considering is actually still making direct vendor applications possible for property owners who meet certain income eligibility requirements. But if you don't meet an income eligibility requirement, you will be required to make those arrangements on your own and make application for the rebate on your own rather than having the vendor do it. We are prepared, and we will and have always will do anything we need to do. If there's a person who's not savvy with the computer or just really is having a hard time, we'll do whatever we need to do to help them make a successful application to the program. But for the reasons of what we have experienced so far, we feel that the most responsible way to implement this and avoid some abuse is for us to have individuals making application for their rebates rather than having vendors make direct application.
No, thank you for that explanation. And you guys are always available. Amy's crew came down to Londonderry and helped people fill out applications. It was very much appreciated. They were there the whole time with a line of people trying to wait. So much appreciated. You guys are always willing to help. Thank you for that explanation. They were, some of my elderly constituents were concerned that they wouldn't have any help. So thank you for that explanation.
No, we will make sure. And please, if you become aware of someone who's struggling with the program, please just reach out to me and we'll make sure that they get the help they need.
Thank you.
Rosemary.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Mike. I'm taking minutes this month, so if you could send me your notes, that would be great, Mike.
I certainly will. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I want to piggyback on the issue that Laureen raised. Kind of upsets me to know that the state is expending taxpayer money to sample wells that are within the consent decree. And Saint-Gobain says that they're not sampling because they believe that they're not the sole source of the contamination. Could you clarify that? Does DES have any evidence that there is another company that has contributed to that contamination, either all or in part?
Well, so important to understand that the consent decree boundary includes 64 square miles. And within that boundary, there are fire stations and manufacturing facilities of all descriptions. So there are certainly other potential sources of PFAS within the consent decree area. There's some legal, considerations there about what the argument they're making. Make no mistake, we're not happy with that either. There's a reason that we asked them to do that sampling, because we feel and continue to feel that they're responsible to do that sampling. And we're certainly prepared to evaluate on a case-by-case basis whether a particular detection, is plausibly, can be partly or completely attributed to the company. So we're not being unreasonable about that. But that's something that is a issue of our continued compliance monitoring and enforcement considerations with respect to the consent decree. And I shouldn't really get into that, but make no mistake, that's not something we just accepted that's our responsibility. We're doing it only because we feel that those people deserve to be sampled, not because we think the state's responsible to do it.
Okay, I totally agree. So there is the opportunity in the future for the state to go after Saint-Gobain for reimbursement of those expenses.
That's correct, right?
Okay.
And we've already told them with respect to the sampling, we expect to cost recover.
Okay, good. And then another question I have is there has been growing comments in the Merrimack community, particularly among that whole neighborhood around Wildcat Falls. There's rumor going around that the Saint-Gobain is not going to install the water main or the water connection. So, but you're saying, so if I go and tell them, if I tell those constituents that the water line extension will begin, they'll break ground in, I think, later this month, would that be a true statement?
Well, and given that you're asking this question, I will confirm it. But the report I got from Andy, this is, keep in mind, I'm the messenger, but a lot smarter people and more reliable people than me provide this information. So the report I got from Andy is that they've finalized the design packages for extensions and connections in the Wildcat and Brenda Lane area. And service application requests have been provided to all eligible properties. And the selected contractors are tentatively planning to start the work the week of July 22nd and anticipate needing 3 to 4 months to complete the work.
Okay, I'm going to share that with them if you don't mind.
You should be able to.
Okay, all right. And then I can also just take it from your report when we get it. And that's all I had. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Oh, and it's good to see Amy here, by the way.
Mindy, go ahead.
Hi. And I apologize if this question has been asked and answered before and I didn't hear it. Is the burden on Saint-Gobain or the state to prove whether the contamination is from Saint-Gobain?
That's a legal question that I don't really want to get into, and I'm not necessarily qualified.
Fair, that's fair.
I will tell you that because, I don't think anybody, including Saint-Gobain, disputes that they've had widespread impacts to groundwater and drinking water within the consent decree area. And to that extent, even if there are other sources, it doesn't mean that they're not responsible. So, and this is an area that, we still struggle with a little bit, but important to understand that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Min.
Okay, so Mike, thanks for the update. I was kind of mentally trying to calculate the number of people that had been sent letters who you feel are within the consent decree and could be the responsibility of Saint-Gobain. And it sounded like about 150 letters were sent. Is that right? Yeah. And then of those, are there others that need to have letters sent, including now? Does that cause additional step outs within the radius of impact that now add additional homes that need to be sampled?
Yeah, certainly. What would happen is if there's an exceedance, then we would look at properties around that. In most cases, probably those properties have been sampled, but if there are properties that haven't been sampled, we would request in the first instance that the company do that. And if for some reason they declined to do it, then we would do it. So what we're trying to accomplish through this process is making sure that everybody within the consent decree area has been sampled.
Okay,
If they're,
but
if
so
they're amenable to it.
so do you that 150 set of letters covers everybody who wasn't sampled? Because I thought the number was quite higher in previous meetings that you had told us, but.
Well, it's easy to keep in mind too that there's the non-responsive ones, right? And that was a much greater number. So it's easy to mix up the different numbers. But my understanding is that the properties that were identified that needed to be sampled, that Saint-Gobain was refusing to sample, was on the order of 150, and
Okay.
that we made offers to all of those properties.
And those step out requirements would be applied with the current AGQS then, not with the MCL, right?
Well, and keep in mind, I mean, we're inside the consent decree, so it's been our position that really any wells within inside the consent decree should be sampled. So unlike in an area where we haven't sampled before, where if we find an exceedance and we step out, it could include a lot of wells that need to be sampled. That's unlikely to happen in this case because it's our position that all the wells should have been sampled already anyways.
Yeah, I'm asking because I was under the impression that some of those areas are on the edge of the consent decree boundary,
I see what you
especially
mean.
up in the
So-
northwest.
I
So I'm
see.
wondering if,
So, okay, so I understand. So if you were near the boundary and we found an exceedance, then we would, under our normal procedures, we'd draw that 500-foot radius and we'd extend offers to sample.
Okay.
To the boundary. And then if they were inside the consent decree, we'd expect Saint-Gobain to do it. If they were outside, then we would do it.
okay. And one follow-up question. So is kind of following up on Lorraine's and Rosemary's question. Is there anything in that data that you've seen to date of those 150 or so samples that you have, or how many ever it is? You said 70% were above the MCLs and some 6 or 7 were above the AGQS. Is there anything in that data that leads you to believe that there may be a different source distinct from Saint-Gobain? Is there a different profile of the PFAS chemicals that you see?
There are some examples where we do see a different signature that may be associated with a fire station or some other facility, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Gary, I believe you had a question.
Well, this is a 30,000-foot question and can be answered perhaps not, but maybe some other point in the today. I have some concerns with the Chevron decision that the SCOTUS came down with, and I was wondering if people had a chance to formulate their thoughts and what they might be in terms of ramifications for not necessarily immediate here at the moment, but certainly in the future, and certainly it might impact legislation for next session as well. And just wondered if people have any thoughts that they wanted to share at this point, and maybe it should be put off for another meeting. But I'm personally quite concerned.
Yeah, well, I will share that certainly, the decision applies specifically to the interpretation and application of federal statute and rule. So it's not necessarily an immediate effect for a state program, but as a regulator, generally, I think our whole community is very concerned about that decision. And we do have concerns about how it might trickle down to state level or certainly impact our work where we're implementing federal regulations directly. So yeah, the short answer and the 60,000-foot answer is yes, we're concerned about it.
I also would add to that, we know we're a small state. We do the best we can. We have limited resources, thus we defer a lot to federal, and we need that strength. So my concern is, as you probably know, there's the 2 huge lawsuits, one challenge in the MCLs by, trade lobbyists, et cetera, and the other one challenging the CERCLA and the hazardous substance designation. The science is solid on that. So when those go to court, the EPA will prevail on the science. But the precedent has been set, and that's what I think you're watching of this, a little bit more of a federalist approach, weaken the federal agencies and leave action to the states. And my concern with those two lawsuits is if the federal prevails, I've also involved in filing some comments with both of those suits that are lengthy and extensive. If you want to read them, I'll send them to you, but you have the time, perhaps. Most people don't. So my worry is the federal government could very well prevail, and I think they will in those actions, and then it goes to the Supreme Court, and then what? So we really are at a troubling time when it comes to environmental protections and regulatory and policy that has to do with more than PFAS, but PFAS in particular. This administration has done what, regardless of what you think about anything else that they've done on this topic, they have made unprecedented promises and kept them. And some of the nation is kind of rattled by that because they basically, plain and simple, want the government to stay out of their business and keep doing what they're doing. We can't be used as a garbage can, and our national resources are pretty important. So that's my thoughts on that. And if you want me to send you those filings and support, I'll be glad to do it at some point.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm keeping.
You'd like to read them. Most people would say, that's good, you did it, thanks.
No, I'm keeping a file, both the scientific basis, and there is surprisingly a lot of very high-level academic investigations about the ubiquity and the characteristics and some of the subspecies that are not directly PFAS chemicals themselves, but are subspecies that are actually more damaging than the PFAS themselves. And so I think it behooves us to not only keep up with the PFAS itself and the regulations that are incumbent, but also keep attuned to the academic side that'll keep us our attention to things that we should be, staying tuned to.
In the addition to CERCLA and other standards are halted, the intent was to expand and the sciences there and toxicity, et cetera, on many other things that meet this definition, but that's stalled out because of the legal action. So it's really unfortunate, but I'll send you those when I get a chance.
Yeah, if you don't mind, if it's convenient, I'd appreciate it.
Nancy, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. I was just wondering, Maureen, can you send those to me as well? Thank you.
Amy, did you have a comment? Amy Costello? Or were you
No, I just wanted to get I just wanted to get the response, Maureen, also. Thank you.
Yeah.
I nodded, yeah. The record response.
Go ahead.
Anybody else?
Hey, Lorraine, send it to the whole commission.
Okay.
And actually, we can put it on the website too.
There you go.
All right, thanks, Chris. I just wanted to clarify a couple things, Mike, if you have a minute. The $8 million drinking water groundwater trust, that was a grant, and that was to Londonderry, did you say?
That's correct.
And that's for water line extensions?
Right. Londonderry has ambitious plans to extend water well beyond into neighborhoods that are outside the consent decree area, and wants to really essentially, there's not a lot of public water in Londonderry right now, so they're really looking to substantially expand the footprint of water, public water distribution in the town. And this would be a project where basically the High Range Road is the road, the north-south road that describes the outer boundary. And there are a number of communities or neighborhoods west of that where St. Gobain has a responsibility to provide alternate water, where for about 300 homes they would propose to provide alternate water or through a water line connection. But then there are communities and neighborhoods to the east of High Range Road where St. Gobain is not compelled to do that, but where there are impacts by PFAS contamination. And Londonderry wants to make sure that it has ample footprint capacity to provide water main extensions in those areas to provide alternate water for those folks.
That's great. I'm happy for Londonderry. And I think you said something about the drinking water groundwater trust is that exhausted? Is that what you said? The funding in
No,
there?
not the whole trust fund. No, boy, I don't want to start that.
That's what I thought you said. That's why I wanted to ask.
No, we had I guess what was it? Must have been about a $5 million. We had a $5 million allocation from the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund dedicated to the rebate program, and we have exhausted that.
Okay.
That monies has been the whole trust fund has more money than that in it for a whole host of purposes, and it is not exhausted.
I'm glad I asked. It's a very different animal. And I was just curious, the remedial action plan that St. Gobain submitted, that's like the third revision, I believe. That's the one we're talking about for the remediation of the site's groundwater.
I don't know if it was. I think
Well,
it was
actually,
revised twice.
The
I don't
second
think
revision.
the third
Sorry,
revision.
yeah, the original, then the revised, and now this is the second revision.
That's correct.
Do you happen to know offhand if they're still recommending monitored natural attenuation?
Yeah, I think I've shared with this group before that it is, it's underwhelming to us what's been proposed, and that's taken some time for us to get a detailed comment letter out.
I assume that's on One Stop, available for.
Yes, yeah, and there's links. There have been for several months now links to that in the minutes as well.
Okay. All right, that was all I had. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? Mike, I just have a couple, really, they're time frame questions because we have our next meeting in September and then about 6 weeks after that to get a report done. So in terms of the ENV 600 rules, will those be ready for the Joint Legislative Committee on rules by September or before September?
I think they will likely go to the jail car in September.
September.
Okay.
Tight time frame. Okay. And then in terms of comments on the site plan, will DES have done its comments on site plan remediation by the September meeting?
I'd like to. I hope so. Yeah. I think so.
Okay. And groundwater management permit, what's the status of that going to be?
Yeah, that comment letter should go out even sooner.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And unless there are any other questions from Mike, we'll go to Leanne now for the DHHS update.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have an update on the Merrimack cancer investigation. So just sharing that DHHS and Dartmouth have met with the Projects 3 Advisory Board. So that's the steering committee, the scientific advisory board, and the community advisory board, and have been taking recommendations from the board on narrowing down the study design for the project. The teams continue to work to analyze the cancer data that are available, and this updated analysis will update the analysis previously done by DHHS, which looked at data through 2019, and they'll be adding data through 2021 to that analysis, as well as looking at some other factors. So the team's making progress on the study design, the institutional review board protocol, and community engagement studios. The first community engagement studio was held on June 29th, and additional studios are scheduled for July 12th and July 18th with virtual and in-person options. So the first studio, I believe, had 11 participants that were confirmed to participate, and then ultimately 8 members participated. So we are still looking for some additional participants for the studio on July 18th. We've been doing some additional outreach efforts to try to solicit feedback. We had a paid Facebook ad that we circulated, which ended up kind of attracting a lot of attention from some bots. So we got, unfortunately, some faulty answers with folks or with these bots responding to the survey and signing up for the engagement studio. So the team had to work through that and kind of cull through those. So that was a kind of a lesson learned for that kind of outreach effort. We've also been running an ad in the Hippo newspaper. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but that's set to run for the rest of this month. And then some flyers and postcards were also distributed around Merrimack. So again, if anyone has anyone they know that might be interested in participating in the studio, please send them our way. And then the next update is on the PFAS clinicians guidance. We're still working on updating the New Hampshire specific guidance with the new recommendations from ATSDR. And that is all I have.
Okay. Great, thank you. Go ahead, Rosemary. Can't hear you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Leanne, if you could just send me your report, that would be great for the med. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nancy first.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. Can you just confirm the time of that studio on the 18th?
Let me see if I have that. 2:30 p.m.
Okay, the other thing, I've had a couple of people reach out to me and say that they would like to be part of this, but it's not convenient for people that work during the day. So offering these in the evening would really, I think, increase interest and connections for people. I think we're missing a lot of people that would be interested but just can't make the times that have been scheduled thus far.
Okay, that's good feedback. Thank you. I know they were also looking at potentially something on a weekend as well, so that might also be helpful. Okay.
Thank you.
Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, Leanne, you right at the end, you mentioned the medical guidelines,
yes.
that was in process. Is that going to go out to, the Medical Society, the Nurses Association, PA Society, or what's the status for that dissemination?
I think we're still working on the best way to get that information out.
Okay, I'd like to be kept in the loop there, since technically I'm the representative for the Medical Society, and I'd like to make sure that we hold their feet to the fire as well.
Any other questions for Leanne? Go ahead, Don.
Thanks, Chris. I know this was mentioned at the last meeting. Did anybody try to contact WMUR to see if they could do anything about public outreach? And I'm not sure if it has to be done like as a commercial or something, but if it could just be mentioned in their news broadcast or something for, they usually do 3 broadcasts a day, maybe for a couple days, or 1 day a week or something for a couple weeks. That way, I don't think there would be a cost associated with that if it's just a public announcement through a news media type of informational piece. So that might be something that if cost is an issue, because I understand, I don't know, but I would guess that trying to have a separate ad run would be an expensive proposition. I'm kind of surprised that something on this nature would be something that they would still want to charge for as an ad, if they are. I just don't know if anybody's reached out, so I don't know if you have any feedback on that or not. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the efforts have really tried to focus more at a, in a regional level, and some of those outlets that would be, more statewide. We've tried to steer more local. So I know there were some recent conversations about the Merrimack TV station, and I don't know if, if locally that's a resource that folks use very much, if that would even be an effective tool. But I know that was something that we were talking about just the other day. And if anybody has any feedback or suggestions on the best way to connect with the TV station, I'd be happy to know.
Yeah, I'm sure the Merrimack TV would be more than happy to put this on the Merrimack town website and Merrimack TV. But I really agree with Dawn. The WMUR does, they do these spotlights and, about different communities all the time. And I think you know, it has made the news that the increased cancer incidents here. And I think of, you know, even if they do a little follow-up study and just say, you know, this is, again, you know, this study is now underway, and any Merrimack resident that is interested, I feel like that's part of the thing that we don't always do well is to get the communication piece. And I feel like, you know, we're in a good place. We've got DHHS and Dartmouth, and we just need the people to be aware of that opportunity, because not everybody's on social media. Not everybody. And Merrimack TV is phenomenal, but there are many people who never turn on Merrimack TV. So I just think it's an opportunity that, you know, I don't think it would be really an unreasonable request, given that this has made WMUR news, and it's a follow-up story in my mind. I would think maybe there are environmental people, and we certainly have contacts at WMUR that might also help if DHHS decides that that's a good pathway to increasing response.
We also still have the weekly newspaper mailing. It's brief, but it does focus on local news. One is under the Telegraph umbrella, and I think there might be a Union Leader one. And you know what I mean? If people in the Merrimack area, those little small newspapers, they come out about once a week, and they have local stuff in there. So they would do that as community, under community, whatever. I don't think they would charge for that.
And the patch.
Patch is all online now, so, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I know we had talked about patch, but I don't know where we ended up on that. And so in Merrimack, that weekly newspaper insert, is that the Union Leader or is it the Telegraph?
I think there's both. I think there's,
Okay.
because I glance at them if there's any story that's interesting, but I never look at the title of who sends it, but I'm pretty sure there's a Union Leader mailer and a Telegraph mailer, and that goes to every mailbox. So there's a whole people who read what comes in the mailbox and don't necessarily use social media.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Oh, thank you. Leanne, I'm just wondering if maybe again you could send to all of us the press release, a link, and the graphic that you used in the ads, and maybe we can help push all of that out in our own universes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the Bedford Library has copies. I haven't been in at the circulation desk of the announcement. I don't know if Merrimack does, but it's we're looking for about 24 people to participate in these studios of people who frequent the library. We ought to be able to get that out of Merrimack.
I know that that we hung stuff up in the library in Merrimack, and I think also the Y, but I don't know about, that's a good point about the Bedford Library or other town libraries. So we do find that we need about 12 people to sign up, because inevitably 4 to 5 won't show up. So you really need about 8 to 10 people to have a good session.
Okay.
As I think of it, I think I might, I don't know if this would fly or not, but maybe talk to MBD to see if we can do a public notice through our water bills or something like that, just to include something. I know a lot of people are on electronic now, and we can send messages out that way, so it doesn't really cost anything for postage. So maybe I'll talk to them about seeing if that's something. I know our next commissioner meeting's on Monday night, so and I've seen the Facebook posts, so that I'm glad that's getting out there. So I believe it's just taking that graphic and kind of putting that into some other kind of communication. I assume there's no copyright or anything infringement that would happen with that. It's a public announcement, right?
Right. We do have, and I'll send around with my notes. We did create a postcard flyer that could be printed out. We actually printed out copies of it and hung it up around town, but I'll send that also so you have it. But that's something that could easily be printed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions or comments for Leanne? If not, thank you, Leanne. And
Thank you.
Maureen, how are we doing with the legislative update?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the committee. Only 5 bills, according to my 2 charts, are remaining here for updates. So one was mentioned actually earlier in this meeting. That comes from our 2023 chart, and it's House Bill 398, signed into law on July 3rd. And that was the disclosure of PFAS in real estate sales. So that now is a signed bill. 4 bills are in enrollment. And as we know, that gets a little gray in terms of timing and movement. However, those bills are as follows, all House bills. 1114, 1415, 1649, 1613. Now, I know that some bills have gone from the Secretary of State's office to the governor's desk this week. I don't know if any of those bills are included, but we continue to watch the press releases from the governor's office. And that's the latest. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on status of legislation? If not, that kind of brings us to just mentioning again that we have our final or 5-year report, annual report due in the beginning of November. Don Provencher's provided me with some of his views on and feedback. So if anyone else has anything, please get it to me. Because next time we convene, there's going to be very little time to work through things. So, Don, I don't know if you want to go into any of what your subject areas were.
Yeah, I'd like to just to kind of make everyone aware. I did send an email out before this meeting. There are 5 items in there. I just kind of look back over the last couple of years about the things that I think are still kind of hanging around that could be addressed for seeing if we can make some progress, some additional progress. And I know, Mike, this has some to do, we've talked about most of these in the past. As I go through each one, if you have some comments to make after each one, maybe it would make better use of our time to do it that way if you're willing to do that. So the first item that I was looking at is expanding the current groundwater management zone that was established in the 2018 consent decree with the state of New Hampshire and St. Cobain. And the primary premise behind that is actually goes back to some of the research that I believe Mindy Messmer did as part of this group. And I think it was circulated around to this group, as a matter of fact, which basically there was some evidence that suggested that St. Cobain underestimated the strength of the PFOA that they had used. And, you know, it presumably the air modeling that was done was based on that lower concentration PFOA product. So, you know, it raises the question whether that air modeling is accurate, and would the boundary of the GMZ been bigger if the air modeling was based on the higher strength of the PFOA. I think I'm saying that correct. Mindy might want to jump in and correct if I've said anything wrong. But, you know, I was just kind of thinking that might be an avenue that we might want to request additional information on to look into further. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Mindy.
No, that's pretty, it was how much they used of pure PFOA. That was a question.
Okay.
So Don, are you talking about what's been identified in the consent decree as the pre-GMZ, or are you talking about the outer boundary?
I guess I'm not sure. My understanding was both boundaries were established based on air modeling. Is that not correct? I believe that was actually stated to us back in 2019 with the meeting with the governor and the AG or it was actually at a public hearing that was based on air modeling to some extent. So I'm not sure how much that factors in.
Yeah, it's complicated. Certainly the shape and the initial work that went into identifying those was influenced by that. But it's important to also remember we had a lot of data. We had actual data on the ground when we established that. As far as the pre-GMZ goes, that's almost really irrelevant because it's not the GMZ. It's not going to be the GMZ. So it doesn't really matter what that is what it is for the purposes of the discussion. In the consent decree, what it really meant was just an area where Saint-Gobain acknowledged that, yeah, the impacts within that zone, they were more or less acknowledging were clearly theirs, and they didn't argue about that. But as far as the outer boundary goes, that is set through the consent decree. And certainly, you know, and keep in mind too, that with respect to the reports that this commission puts out, the state agencies have typically had very little to say about what's in that report. And I'm not trying to change that now. So I'm not sure it's really helpful for me to comment about that. But I just want to make sure I understood which boundary you were talking about.
I think it's the outer boundary I'm talking about. And, you know, we're finding, as you know, a number of wells that are outside that outer boundary with, I'm guessing, no other obvious source of PFAS contamination that might be localized out there. So the thought is,
and to be clear, we absolutely believe that there are impacted properties that were impacted above our state standards as a result of emissions from Saint-Gobain that exist outside the outer boundary. No question.
and that's what I'm wondering is if those wells are being found because the PFOA was actually stronger than what was thought to be emitted.
I don't think that's the reason. I think that the problem is that, you know, when we negotiated the consent agreement, we were dealing with very different standards. So that has an impact on it. And again, there's a lot that goes into negotiating something like that. And I'm not going to try to have a discussion about that here, but
yeah,
I don't think it was a result of, you know, the modeling or the understanding of how much PFOA was emitted. It was really more about reacting to the data we had at the time and the information. Right.
Yeah, it's like, I guess maybe I'm not clear. I'm not sure if anybody is exactly how that outer boundary was delineated, but I was under the impression it had a lot to do with air modeling. And obviously the air models have to be based on an input concentration being emitted. And if that concentration was significantly underestimated, then the extent of the air currents would have been further than what was initially modeled. And I guess that's my point. So the premise of the whole GMZ in the consent decree itself, in my mind, is questionable if those factors do, you know, relate to what I'm talking about. So anyways, the second item was.
Can I just stop you there? Mindy,
Sure.
do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I just want to follow up on that, what Don just said. So the issue was that, you know, there is some information that suggests that it's possible that the more extensive use of pure PFOA was not disclosed to the agencies at the time. And I remember getting walked through by Kathy Beam about how the air modeling, you know, and how they came to those. And it was very clear that information, because they didn't have any information that predated a certain time frame, that some assumptions were made for the historical use. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that, you know, the state didn't have a lot of information. They probably did at the time. However, there's some new information that suggests that based on some testimony by experts in other cases with respect to particularly Merrimack, that information may not have been disclosed to the state agencies and was not used, therefore, by the state in their air emission modeling. That's what I was talking about.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Don, go ahead.
Thank you. So the second one, I think we talked about here just a little while ago about the wells that Saint-Gobain refused to accept responsibility for. And I think that might be a recommendation that we might want to make to look into that a little further. I don't know if Saint-Gobain has provided any evidence of any other potential sources, but I think that needs to be looked into a little bit further. It's unfortunate, as comments were made here, that tax money has to go into sampling those wells, and I understand, and I'm glad to hear that you guys are tracking that and fully intend to go back to Saint-Gobain on that. So that sounds like it's kind of already in play there. So that's good to hear. The other one is something else that we've talked about in the past, and I know I'm talking about the Saint-Gobain's refusal to accept and address the long-term operation and maintenance of MVD's GAC media after the 5-year settlement agreement at wells 4 and 5 at MVD. And I guess I'm aware that there were 3 letters, one of which is back in April 1st, 2016, and that was generic across, the whole southern New Hampshire area for Saint-Gobain to provide long-term maintenance of all affected wells. That includes public and private. Subsequent to that, there has been additional discussion. I know DES had sent 2 letters to Saint-Gobain asking them to provide the long-term or a plan for long-term O&M for wells 4 and 5 at MVD. And Saint-Gobain responded both times saying that they basically just don't believe that they're responsible, and for multiple reasons. What I'm looking at here is there was legislation in the past that had failed in order to force Saint-Gobain to provide that O&M. And the main reason that it failed was because the legislators were saying that this is an enforcement issue, not a regulatory issue. So the time was allowed for the enforcement issue to play out. And I believe that the letters from DES occurred after that bill had failed. And that appears to have essentially come to a halt. So I think if the legislation is to be kind of resurrected to try to look at that again, we need some kind of confirmation of, I guess, what the state's position is on following up on those 2 letters. Is that something that I think is probably not going to occur any further? Or because what I'm looking at is the legislature is going to say, well, what happened before when you said it was an enforcement action? And it's just kind of, I don't know that there's a resolution to that one way or the other. So I guess I'm wondering, does it make sense for the state to take a position and say either they're going to try to continue to issue enforcement letters or probably not? At least that way we know where we're at, and we can put to bed the comment that the legislature made that this is an enforcement issue. Because if it's no longer an enforcement issue, then it's not an enforcement issue, and there are reasons to proceed with the legislative actions. That's kind of where I'm coming from. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if you have anything to offer on that at all, Mike, or not, but.
I think, Don, that really is an enforcement, not enforcement, but a legal matter between the town or MVD and the company. And certainly we have a role to play in that discussion perhaps, but I'm not sure it's an appropriate discussion for this commission. And I don't think anything I could say or not say would be helpful to MVD in this setting. I really believe that's something that should be outside of this setting.
Okay.
Mindy, go ahead. You have a comment?
I just have a question. So Saint-Gobain didn't pay for any of the installation of the wells 4 and 5 remediation, did they?
They did. They ended up
Okay.
covering about 2/3 of the total cost. And
Okay.
they put aside money that was supposed to be for 5 years of operation and maintenance of those filters, which is coming to an end next year, essentially, 2025. So it's really after 2025 that from that point on, it's going to be entirely on the burden of the customers. And that's kind of what we're trying to rectify.
So I guess I don't understand why they weren't responsible for the full amount, not just 2/3 of the initial capital.
So anything that wasn't specific to PFAS itself, like we had to build a new building, we had to build chemical injection, chlorination, all that was not related to PFAS. So that was just deducted right off the top.
Okay.
And it ended up being a cost overrun like everything usually happens. So, you know, we had to eat that cost overrun as well. So any other questions, or I can just move on to the next item? All right. The next item is, I think we did talk about actually the groundwater remediation at the Merrimack facility. And pleased to hear that they've followed up with a second revision on that. I just wanted to make, you know, some points that there are other sites in the country where much more sophisticated remedial efforts have been proposed with slurry walls and pump and treat to kind of, you know, direct the groundwater into a certain area where it can be collected and treated. I know in the past at public hearings in Merrimack that it was stated that, you know, pump and treat would be a expected remedial action for something at this scale. And one of the things I had read in the prior two reports that Saint-Gobain's consultant had filed was one of the reasons that they weren't looking at anything more sophisticated was because it's practically impossible to return the natural ambient groundwater to below the ambient groundwater quality standards, which I agree with, because that would have to be a significant reduction that would probably take hundreds of years. So it could probably never happen. But I think Mike and I, we had a conversation, and you can confirm what I'm saying if you want. But I believe you said that that's not necessarily the measuring stick, is to return the groundwater back to ambient groundwater quality standards. If there's some high level that it could be brought down to significantly below where it is, but not quite as low as ambient groundwater standards, that would be a big win as well. And the reason I bring this up is because downstream of that, you know, you've got that groundwater that's slowly discharging into the river on a daily basis, and it's highly contaminated. It is being diluted in the river, but you've got Merrimack, I know Haverhill, Lawrence, Lowell, there's a lot of other surface water supplies that are going to need to treat their groundwater because they use the Merrimack River. So there is a direct relation to that. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, Mike, or not, but I'll leave it up to you if you do.
Yeah, we'll be commenting in detail, but you're right. I mean, we certainly, to say that a site's so contaminated that we can't restore it to drinking water, it means we don't have to do anything, is not an answer that we've ever accepted. And
Right.
we don't intend to accept it here.
Thanks. And then just the last item is something that came up relatively recently to me in MBD. And I'm speaking on behalf of myself here. I'm not representing MBD on this issue. But there is a settlement, a class action settlement that was reached across the country with 3M. I believe it's around $14.5 billion nationwide for remediating PFAS impacted public water supplies. Now, this applies just to public water supplies. My understanding is that even the small public water supplies may not qualify, and the private wells do not qualify. But there's a table that was established, and it's up to the public water suppliers across the country to file their own claims for damages. And the amount of the claim is sort of specified in the tables, and it's based on how much water that you pump, as well as the extent of the contamination, the level of PFAS contamination. The higher the contamination, the higher the settlement. The more water you pump, the higher the settlement. You know, so we have calculated what that number is in the tables. And I don't know if anybody else here might have looked into that, and has any follow-up numbers or anything? That looks like, Laureen, you're shaking your head.
Yes. Mike, as you know, I was at NMOA in April, and it was Judge Hank Naughton. I have his card right in front of me. I just pulled out of the door to quote his name, get him on record from Napoli. And he had a whole presentation, and I was very excited to hear this presentation. He comes from Central to Western Mass. His dad was a public water utility foreman. So he came up through the ranks, this guy, and became a lawyer. He was fabulous. And he felt really strongly when he heard what was going on across the nation, instead of just the state AGs going after manufacturers to recoup costs and all the rest of it, he felt the public water utilities had really been put out by this. And I'm very much for the people, as you guys know. So I was like, yeah, that's what we need to hear. So he explained it all with his slides, walked through it all. There was a formula. I actually know the numbers, the MVD, pretty darn well. I estimated roughly, with my mental math at that point, be 3.5 million anyways, under 4, decent change. So I talked to him after his presentation, and I said, hey, I have a couple questions. They're specific to Merrimack. Are you familiar with our situation? He was, and he informed me at that point something that stunned me. He told me, I don't understand this at all. I think I know why, but it's not acceptable to anyone in this community. It doesn't matter what their views are, what their politics are. Everybody cares about money. He stated, we are the only state in the nation whose attorney general has basically stated, you can't apply for that. And I said, so I'm saying to this brilliant lawyer, retired judge, are you sure about that? And then I realized that wasn't pretty cool to say that. So I said, help me understand that. And he gave me more details, and I couldn't believe it. I asked him a lot of questions. I said, do we as citizens have any rights? Because that's unacceptable. It seems to me the state of New Hampshire is taking away our right to be directly compensated for what we voted in, 13.5 million, so that covers some of it several years ago, for all of our costs that we did not cause, and we know responsible parties are in the area. So he said, that is how it is, and I haven't heard of it. I'll look into it a little further. So I reached out, to Don and Wolf, and I go, hey, do you guys know about this? And they said, we've become aware of it. And, I got stuck. I asked a few people, and I was really surprised, and it is confirmed. So I don't know what the thought is. The Attorney General, I know, is going for the big lawsuit. They can't apply for this because they're not a public water utility. And my suspicion is, I hate to say it, but I think they're using, I can say it, I'm a citizen, I'm not an elected official and MVD commissioner, so I'm going to say it. My suspicion and worry is they're using the Merrimack data, which is unprecedented in New Hampshire and New England, as we all know, to further boost their claim, the bigger suit, which is pretty cool for the state, goes into the trust funds, and we have a lot to pay for across the state. But I do not believe that we will see that money for what we should get. And I would love a straight answer for someone. If someone in New Hampshire could commit, I know it isn't you, Mike, but you can tell I'm like about this. If someone, in the AG's office could say, we promise you, you will get your money, because we've borrowed money from the state. And again, it's all public dollars. So the only state in the nation whose, leadership or whoever it is there has stepped in and said, you can't do this. We as in the MVD is public. It's not a private, water facility. It's a very unique and phenomenal organization that we're very proud of here in Merrimack. And we are basically, our hands are tied, and our state is telling us we can't do this. And all we have to do is apply, submit, they apply the formula, here's your money, and that's what it's for. So if anyone has any insight on that, I would love to hear it, because I wish I could just go knock on the AG's door and give him a piece of my mind, but where's that going to get me? I have to have Nancy with me in the store.
So
it's is that a fair summary, Dawn? Am what I'm saying is it kind of in line what you know? I know you're in a tough position here.
It is, and that's the point I wanted to make is, at first, I was under the impression that they were doing this on our behalf to give and this is not just MVDs, this is every public water supplier in the state. From what I understand, there was 2 letters that I attached to that email this morning that the AG sent out to all the public water supplies in the state, from what I understand. And when I read that, at first, we all thought that that was the AG is doing this for us, but we were going to get the money from it. And then just a couple of weeks ago, it became apparent that, from what I understand, is they're taking that money and putting it into a general PFAS remediation fund, which is going to be used for all wells in the state, from what I understand, even wells that aren't qualified to get settlements out of this class action. So right off the bat, if that's the case, that's going to certainly dilute any award that the public water suppliers are going to get if some of that burden needs to be shared out with other wells.
We should be doing both. They should be doing that on behalf of the state. The costs are immense to New Hampshire. Last I heard, it was over, what, 155 million for PFAS cost to the state. But we should also be applying for the separate public water utilities and getting reimbursed there, which then helps the state, you know, because they don't have to help us as much. So I don't understand.
And again, I don't want to jump to conclusions. I'm not saying that MVD, we don't know. That's the problem, is we don't know what amount, if any, could be coming to MVD. We don't know if there's going to be something close to this, to the class action settlement, or nothing at all. I don't know. So, you know, as far as my fiduciary responsibility to the customers, you know, it's in my interest to protect them. And by doing nothing about this, I feel like I'm not doing my responsibility. So that's why I want to ask these questions. Just, you know, just a couple of other distinctive issues in the letters. The AG cited the authority to do this based on a precedent in the MTBE litigation, where they did the active litigation against the companies, the gasoline companies, and they won the settlement. And I think that was challenged by the city of Dover, and there was a decision that was made that said, no, Dover, you don't have any responsibility for this money. It's the state's responsibility. And I guess the reason is because the state claims that it owns the groundwater, not the public water suppliers. But this is a different animal here, where, as far as I understand, this class action was done by different attorneys in one of the Carolina states. And I don't know that the AG had any participation at all in that litigation. And they're kind of just sweeping in and taking the funds. Again, if we knew what we could be in store for, I might not have any problem with it at all, you know, but we just don't know. And that's part of the problem, is it's very unknown. The deadline for filing a class action was today. My understanding is that it got extended 2 weeks. So it's now July 26th. You know, so those are the things that we're kind of grappling with. What does this mean? And it's not just the, you know, it's not an MVD Merrimack related issue here. This is every public water supply in the entire state, from what I understand. I don't know if other states, other public water suppliers have been told what they stand to gain out of this. I've reached out to a couple water suppliers, some large ones in the state. One of them had no clue what this was even about. The other one was confused with, there's 2 other litigation going on from the AG against the PFAS manufacturers separately. Those are the state's own litigation, where they are litigating those cases. And obviously, I understand if there's some settlement or a jury decision on those cases, then obviously that is definitely going to fund the PFAS remediation fund. I'm just wondering if the precedent that they're citing is really apples and apples applicable to this class action settlement. And that's kind of where I'm looking for more information, and I'd like to get more information, but we're coming up on that July 26th deadline. So, you know, I think what MVD has been looking at doing is filing our own claim until we know how this plays out. And we also have better information, because we've got monthly, we've been sampling monthly our wells since 2016, the raw water. So we've got that data, and you use the highest recorded value It's not an average, it's the highest recorded value. So if the AG is not using those numbers, if they're using like annual running average for 1 year of sampling that we did, that's not going to catch the high value. So we've already made the AG aware of this, that we are filing a parallel claim, and that we gave them the correct numbers, the flow data and the PFAS numbers to use in their filing. So I think they're filing on behalf of every public water supply in the state, as far as I'm aware of. But that's really where it comes down to. I'm really questioning if we can get more information on how this plays out. If in fact we're the only state in the whole country that's doing it this way, and we don't know what money is available at the end of all of this that could be coming back. You know, if I'm looking at this as a MVD commissioner with the responsibility to my customers, I see a number out there that's available to us, that's known. I would rather know and go ahead with that number than sitting around and waiting to see what happens in the future. And there's other class actions that are coming right behind this one. This is the one for 3M, that's the biggest one. There's one for DuPont, BASF, and Tyco. And those are smaller, but I think it's all the same premise, where it's the degree of concentration of PFAS in the pumping records. So anything we can do to get more information, that's kind of where I'm bringing this up. I'd like to find that out. I know we've had an assistant AG on this committee before explaining things. I don't know if we want to go that far again now, but that being said, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. And I don't know if Mike, if you've been involved in any of this. I figured I'd ask you if you have anything to offer on this or not. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't want to say too much. It is a very complex legal situation. The state's unique position on this stems from the fact that it took a parens patriae case on behalf of the state against these manufacturers and distributors of PFAS. And it is, you're right, it is analogous to what happened with the MTBE lawsuit. And what it means is that, and you wonder whether they're involved or not. They're totally involved. They've been involved in this multi-district litigation from the very beginning, as soon as they got pulled in. And I can tell you the deadlines you're talking about that was extended to July 26th. Staff here in our water and waste divisions for the last 4 months have been working nights, weekends, a lot of overtime, trying to make sure we pull together all the proper information. And we are very well aware what the rules of reporting are, that you look at the highest numbers. People have been working very hard on that. So all that data is absolutely being obtained from all the water systems. We actually went out and helped water systems that weren't in a position to even get that data, help them get it. They used our staff and our resources to try to collect that information, to try to make sure that we put forth the very best showing of the impacts of PFAS contamination on our public water systems. Beyond that, how that's going to get sugar off or how that's going to be distributed, I'm not in a position to talk. I'm not saying I can't say it. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen on that. I think at some point, when we reconvene in the fall, maybe it would be helpful to have Chris Aslan or someone like that who's very close to this, the AG's office, come in and answer some of your questions to the extent that he's able to. But I want to assure you that the agency, in concert with the AG's office, is working feverishly to try to make sure we put our very best foot forward to get as much to every dollar that the state and its water systems are entitled to as a result of this.
Thanks. And again, this isn't just an MVD concern. It covers all public water supply across the state, right? That's what I understand. Sure. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions on Don's issues or other comments on annual report? I guess I would just remind people of the quick legislative windows that Maureen mentioned last meeting, coming up in September for incumbents. And I think to some degree we'll have to see what happens with those bills that have been enrolled. what needs to be done. We'll have to look at whether the MCLs to go the route of prior MCLs and be signed into law as a quicker route, and some of the issues that Don raises perhaps as well. But those are very complex strategy issues, and I think if there are water systems out there with legal counsel, I would definitely consult with legal counsel about what course of action should be taken on behalf of ratepayers. So with that, put my glasses back on.
Chris,
Go ahead, Don.
I just had one, not related to anything we've talked about, fortunately. Just in a way that we can maintain a quorum, because I know we struggled with that last month. I believe Bob Healy has moved to Florida. So I don't know if that means that we can appoint somebody in his position. So that seat's going to be vacated. I don't think he's going to be running for New Hampshire legislature or anything again.
So that
I just want to point that out, whatever that means.
Rosemary.
Yeah, I know I brought this up at a earlier meeting, and Maureen Mooney did a great job putting together a spreadsheet of the positions and who was in. And I kind of dropped the ball following up on that in the last couple of months. And now we're so close to the election in November that I'm thinking if we can just hang on until after the election, whether it's the new or continuing speaker will then make those appointments. I don't know what if there is a consensus among the rest of the commission to do that. I'm just afraid if we appoint someone now, there may be more disruption depending on the outcome in November.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Did I remember Nancy saying, I'm not sure, Nancy, if it was updated, when you filed for the extension of the commission, was there some new rule in the state that limited the quantity and we had too many people and we had to whittle down? I don't know. Let us know about that.
Yeah, no, we're waiting for the governor's signature on this commission. Hopefully he will sign it. I'm sorry for the dogs in the background. My grandkids are out there, and sorry, I've been sending text messages to please quiet down. Anyway, that was my concern, because there was a commission on commissions and the goal was to limit commissions, although our commission will stay the same so that legislation reestablishing the commission will leave us. But I do agree with Rosemary. I think at this point in the summer, people are away. We're not in the House. I think it just makes sense to let the current speaker assign people later if he's still the speaker, and if not, to have the next person do that. And it was the same thing, because I think there are the president of the Senate also gets to appoint, if I'm recalling the legislation. So to me, it just makes sense to wait, because we do have a number of positions, and we will have added Hudson as well in that. So we'll be looking for a town government official and a citizen representative from Hudson as well.
And excuse me, Chris, if I can chime in also, it would be a benefit right now if Rich, I know you're on the call, I think Ron must have dropped off, but at least if we can get citizen representatives from Litchfield and Londonderry added, that would be great. And I believe Hudson was added as well with an amendment to Nancy's bill. So
I will take on an action item to try to get someone from Litchfield.
That's good, because Rich, I believe your appointment may be, I think you're actually the town official. You're not counted as one of state reps, because we're allowed to have 5 state reps. And so I think if we could get that citizen rep, and then after the election, hopefully there'll be, we'll have 5 others, either some of us continuing, but like, especially with Bob's position, getting that replacement state rep.
And then, actually, I'm no longer a selectman. I'm no longer a selectman.
Well, Yeah, so all that
So
has to be sorted out. It may behoove us to have you be the Litchfield citizen representative.
That would be fine.
So that, yeah, it would be. That's probably, maybe when we get to November, we can set up. I know we had that discussion in a previous meeting before I dropped the ball, of having like a subcommittee work on a nomination committee. So I think we should do that, and have that committee named the beginning of November so we can get some new members appointed in December. I don't know, Maureen, what do you think about that? Because you went through the list and made that sheet.
Yes, I'm looking at it now, actually, and what I can do is resend it to everybody too, to sort of get their bearings on this, because it is relatively complicated of who's in which position. So I will send that around. Let's start with that. As for replacing Bob, who incidentally, I know his resignation date becomes effective July 17th or whatever that's worth, but I don't know how the speaker and his office typically handle the resignation of a member and then the ripple effect of all the committees and the commissions and so on and so forth that they have. So my thought is to leave it within the House majority. I believe that's the position Bob held in the speaker's office purview to handle it like they normally would with a resignation. And then it would be nice if anybody has any feedback on the chart to let us know, or any suggestions. I mean, there are names on here I personally am totally unfamiliar with, and I attend 99% of the meetings over the past 4 years. So it would be great to have active members if other members of the commission notice people are inactive or just not interested based on the chart roster. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with that, Maureen. I think it's a good path forward.
I mean, I just agree with general sentiment that we ought to defer, and Bob Healy's resignation, whenever it's effected, isn't going to change the quorum requirement, because it just makes it an even number, and we still need to get to a majority. And just from past experience, House and Senate leadership after an election is very busy with committee appointments, and we are no. I guess I won't compare us to what normally gets compared to is neglected, but I think we sort of fall towards the end of the list of priorities. So I think if we tried to change things now, we would still be waiting till early next year to find out who joins us.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I'll.
With Hudson joining, maybe there will be more enthusiasm to fill vacancies.
I think we're a high priority commission, but that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, and really it's the state reps and the state senator positions that will impact us, but we still have, I mean, we can definitely recruit those citizen representatives. They still have to be confirmed by, I believe, the Senate president, but that would help us secure a more stable quorum if we can reach out to those citizen representatives, because I believe Laureen, and if we reassign Rich, are really the only citizen representatives we have. Well, Chris, I think you're a citizen rep, or you were also, but you're on the town council.
The council has me on their committee.
Right. So, I mean, we could get a citizen rep from Bedford, Litchfield, Bedford, Hudson, Londonderry, and that's 3 people right there.
All right. So we have no meeting next month. I will see you all back here on September 13th at 2 p.m. Have a good August, and any annual report thoughts that you have, please send them along. Thank you very much. And thank you to our legislators. Thank you to our agencies for bringing forward the legislative accomplishments that many of which await signature. So, but you folks have done great work bringing things forward over the last 5 years. Thank you. All right.
Great. And just want to remind Leanne and Mike to send me your reports. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just
You need a
want to say
motion.
it's so great to see Amy back.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn at 3:40. We need a second.
Second.
Would somebody second that, please? Maureen Mooney. All right. Have a great August. We'll see you in September. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.